Why don't we start our program today? And I wish everybody a good afternoon. My name is Sarah Bordelot, and I'm an Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement. And I'd like to welcome you today on behalf of the URI Foundation and Alumni Engagement and the Women's Leadership Council. I'd like to welcome you to our first program in our new Women in Leadership speaker series. The goal of this series is to bring attention to the many successful alumni and friends of the University of Rhode Island and corporate leaders by highlighting their career paths, providing inspiration, and sharing their knowledge and experiences with students and alumni. I'd like to note that this program is being recorded for future viewing. Additionally, we will be taking audience Q&A, and at the end of the program, if you have any questions for our speaker, you can type it into the Q&A feature that you see on your screen. Please note that we may not be able to get to all questions today. Before we get started, I'd like to extend a special thank you to the President of the University of Rhode Island, David Dooley, for attending today's webinar, along with the President of the University of Rhode Island Foundation and Alumni Engagement, Lil O'Rourke, and Vice President of Alumni Engagement, Michelle Nada. Many thanks for your support of this program and for joining us today. I'd also like to make mention of the Women's Leadership Council. Driven by alumni, this council seeks to develop opportunities for all URI women by offering programs for alumni to interact with and act as role models for students and one another. Additionally, the Women's Leadership Council supports and promotes the Women Transforming Women Endowed Scholarship, a scholarship that is awarded each year to a woman-identified student who holds a leadership position and maintains a GPA of at least 3.0. Within a few days of this program, we will send out the recording as well as a link to give to this important scholarship. Now, I am so happy to introduce our host, Nikki Noya, who received her bachelor's degree in communication studies from URI in 2000. Nikki is no stranger to this role, as she is the co-host and executive producer of the nationally syndicated cable show, The Jet Set, TV's first travel talk show. Nikki also currently serves on the advisory board for URI's Harrington School of Communication and Media, as well as the board of the URI Foundation and Alumni Engagement. She is a former junior Olympian in swimming and volleyball and professional volleyball player and former member of the URI volleyball team. Nikki is dedicated to the success of young women and serves as the VP of Dress for Success Miami, and also started a program called Vets for Success. I would like to welcome Nikki Noya.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and welcome everyone. I am so pleased to be here to kick off this wonderful series. As I've gotten to know Margo a bit leading up to this program, there is so much more to learn from her, and I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to say today. Margo graduated from the University of Rhode Island with a bachelor's degree in finance and received her MBA from Columbia University. Recently, Margo was appointed by Rhode Island Governor Gina Raimondo to serve as the founding chair of the University of Rhode Island Board of Trustees. Margo brings more than 30 years of executive management, operating experience, and innovative thinking as an investor and business leader. She has built and led several business transformation efforts, delivering strong results and high client retention. Most recently, Margo was the president of Nuveen Advisory Services, a company that is responsible for $1 trillion in assets under management on behalf of clients in 24 countries. In her time as president at Nuveen, they experienced robust expansion, exceeding industry growth rate each year. That doesn't surprise me with her at the helm. Margo is personally and professionally dedicated to advancing women in finance. At Nuveen, she was the founder and executive sponsor of LEAD, Nuveen's external women's investment professional organization, whose mission is to attract and retain women in asset management industry. Margo, I am so excited that you are here today as our first Women in Leadership Series speaker. As you and I have gotten to know each other, I've just discovered so many amazing things about you. So I'm very excited to share all of your expertise with everyone. So if you don't mind, I'm ready to dive right in. Are you?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. So Margo, you have accomplished so much in your career. Can you describe some of the key decision points in your early career that set the path towards your success?
Yeah, so I'll kick off with a story. And first of all, thank you so much for doing this, Nikki. I'm gonna just try as hard as I can, the same level of enthusiasm that you have, but you are so natural on camera. I'm glad you picked the career you did.
Thank you.
So I'll start out with a story, and I tell this story a lot because it really was a pivotal moment in my career, but it also taught me a lot about how to help other people in their careers. So it was a Friday night. I was 23 years old, recently graduated from University of Rhode Island, living in New York City. And I was sitting at my desk and thinking, I like my job, but I really want to be in investment management. I really want to be in the capital markets, and I really want to do something different than what I was doing. It was my first job out of school. I was lucky to get it, but it wasn't investment management. So I go over to the elevator, and there's a man standing there. And I had actually been writing a lot of letters to companies. And on the sort of copy of my letter was this name, Larry Southworth, Vice President, Investment Management. And I thought, oh gosh, like one of these days I'm going to get to know this guy, Larry Southworth, and then my like career will be great. So I walk over to the elevator, and there's a man standing there, and he says to me, "Hey Margo, how are you?" And I'm thinking, oh no, like I'm horrible with names. I'm still horrible with names. And I couldn't remember his name. But I thought, all right, I'm just going to fake it. And I'm going to like just talk to this guy. So we go down in the elevator. And it turns out I was living in New Jersey at the time. So was he. So we start walking towards the PATH train together. And he starts asking me about my career. And I'm telling him like, oh, I like what I do, but I really want to be in investment management. I think I really want to do like what Larry Southworth does. Like, I know this name. And he's like, oh, okay, all right, well, tell me about that. What do you think he does? And so I'm like, I think he's in the like capital markets, and I think he's in, doing investing. And we're walking along. We spend like an hour together talking about the company and careers. And finally, it's my stop, and I'm about to get off the train. And he says to me, do you know who I am? And I'm like, oh, great. Like, this is horrible. This is the one person like I should be making a difference with, because he knows who I am. And I said, I'm so sorry. I don't know your name. And he says, I'm Larry Southworth. So I'm like, oh, great. So the whole weekend, I'm thinking I blew it with like the one person that, could help me. And so here's what happened. Monday, I beat myself up all weekend for not remembering his name. Monday, he calls me and he says, listen, let's go have a cup of coffee. What I do is different than what you want to do. I understand what you want to do. You want to be an investment person. That's not what I do. But I'm going to draw out for you what this whole organization looks like, what the investment organization looks like, and what those different jobs are. And I'm going to connect you with the right people. And sure enough, he did that. And so at 23, I met the head of fixed income. I didn't know anything about fixed income, but it was a way to get into the investment area. And he got me into meet the boss, the boss. And it turns out I got the job. I got a job managing money at 23, which was ridiculous. It was completely irresponsible of the company to give, money to somebody to manage at that age. But I got this opportunity that I thought was incredible. It's very hard to get these kind of jobs. And I just like sort of dove into it and really studied, really tried to, I read lots of books, talked to everybody I could, eventually ended up getting a chartered financial analyst degree and then the MBA, and that helped with my education. But here's the thing that really taught me. What Larry did for me was to really explain to me what that world was about and introduce me to the right people. And so it was somebody that helped me navigate. It wasn't a mentor, and I'll talk a little bit about this later.
Yes, we're going to talk about the difference between mentoring and sponsoring in a little bit.
Right, very different. He basically sponsored me in a way, in that he took his political capital and he introduced me to the right people. And sure enough, I got that job, and it just was a really pivotal moment. And it's taught me to help people, other people that are trying to figure out, like, how do they navigate their career.
Margo, I think he saw a future star in you. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking he said, this is a smart, savvy young woman. You and I have been talking a lot about speaking up, sitting at the table, and being visible. And for you at 23, to already be able to articulate the things that you want, he saw something in you. I know he did. Let's move on.
Or somebody with a really bad memory, and he's like trying to help me.
You have succeeded in an industry, which is finance, that has historically struggled to attract women. It's estimated that women financial advisors represent 15 to 20% of all advisors. What advice do you have for women starting out in investment management today? I just have to add, one of the things that you and I talked about is just because you're not great at math doesn't mean you can't get into finance. So let's talk about those two things.
Okay, so first of all, I'm horrible at math. Like, if you right now put me on the spot and said, what is 8 + 5? I'd have to like use my fingers. Like, it's not a natural thing for me. So what I would say to women that are thinking about business or thinking that they can't get into finance careers, you don't have to be good at math. There's so much to do in the field of finance that's really interesting. There's like things that interest me are about behavioral finance, about what motivates people to make decisions. And that's a huge sort of field of study. And something you have to understand when you're managing money is what's going to motivate the rest of the participants in the market. What is their behavior about? And so there's a lot of qualitative information that you have to be able to understand about the markets that are not necessarily directly related to quantitative study. So don't be afraid of, if you don't like math, it's okay. You can add, there's tons of things that are really fascinating about the capital markets. But I would say that the careers that have developed over the last several years in managing money and in being a financial advisor, for example, are actually really well suited for women. So when you manage money and you're a financial advisor, you have to understand what your client's investment objectives are. And so there's a pretty high EQ that you need to there's an IQ and an EQ, but the EQ is equally as important because you have to sit in front of a client and understand what are they really trying to achieve with their assets. And I would say for me, managing money, that I would sit in front of a union, to an endowment, to a corporate pension plan, to a high net worth individual, and I'd have to be able to get out of them what they really were trying to achieve with their portfolio. So you have to have, just as high of a level of listening and empathy to succeed, I think, in the markets. Financial advisors, though, like in particular, I think women are really well suited to who the new financial advisor is today. So that used to be the financial advisors were like brokers, and they would like set up an equity account for you, and they'd trade stocks. And that is not what a financial advisor is today. And a financial advisor is trying to figure out, like, what are Nikki's financial goals? What's important to her family? And then really create a financial plan for that person. So that's not what I did in my career, but they were our clients. And I've watched the industry change. And it has really struck me that women are really well suited to being a financial advisor, because you really have to have that strong level of understanding what the client's looking for. So I think this industry, which is dominated still by men, in fact, it's still only about 10% of women managing money, and maybe 15 to 20% of women as financial advisors, but it's changing, and it's changing because the jobs are changing.
I think another important point that you and I talked about is how in finance, as in so many fields, relationships are everything. You take the time to build a relationship with your colleagues, with your clients, and I think that's what women are little more naturally inclined to, is fostering those relationships and getting the best out of people. Like you said, what are Nikki's objectives? My objectives might be different for someone else, but I think a woman is naturally inclined to listen and to build those relationships. And we'll get more into how important building relationship is in a little bit. Hey, Margo, let's talk about the difference between mentoring and sponsorship, because I actually didn't know anything about sponsoring. So let's kind of break that down.
Yeah, so a mentor is basic. So there's lots of mentor programs. Almost every company has a mentor program. More and more companies are starting sponsorship programs, and we started one at Nuveen and saw a lot of success in it. A mentor is the way they're typically set up is I'll meet with you, like you and I have a mentor-mentee relationship. Usually means like every quarter or like every other month, we'll sit down for an hour and we'll talk about what's on your mind. We'll talk about some problem that you're encountering, or you're trying to, figure out how do you get to the next level in an organization, or how do you build a network. You come typically with some issue. We talk about the issue, and then that's kind of it. Like they typically don't, that's why the results are mixed. Like sometimes mentors are really good and those relationships expand beyond that one meeting that we have every other month, and they can help really guide your career. But the thing that I've discovered, and when I really think about who helped me in my career, it's really sponsorship. And sponsorship means that I'm going to actually use some of my capital and some of my relationships to help you advance in the organization. And so an example was what I talked about before, where Larry wasn't my mentor, but he basically said, I'm going to go introduce Margo to all these people in the organization. And I'm going to say, listen, I think you should talk to her. And he didn't have to do that. So he's kind of using his reputation to advance my career. And so when we started a sponsorship program at Nuveen, I'll give you an example. And this is not something typically that we do, but the woman who was our head of marketing actually brought somebody. We had a meeting in London, and she brought her sponsor person with her to our meeting in London. And suddenly that person who's sitting at our executive committee, listening to what happens around that table, is meeting a bunch of people that she would never have met before that work in London. And she's associated with our head of marketing. So that person sort of head of marketing put her reputation out there and said, I believe in this person, and I'm going to expose this person to things that are happening in the organization, introduce that person to people, and really sort of leverage their own reputation on behalf of the person they're sponsoring. And that's a totally different way of sort of creating exposure and transparency for people that are in an organization that wouldn't otherwise have, that kind of ability to make those relationships. And a very simple example, sponsorship is, I could bring, Nikki, brought you into some high-level meetings that you wouldn't otherwise be sitting at that table. Just the fact that you're sitting at the table and you're observing how a part of the company works in a way that you wouldn't otherwise have that experience, that's a form of sponsorship. So it's really effective, and it kind of puts the sponsor on the line too, like of taking responsibility for that person's career versus kind of sitting in your office and having a one-on-one relationship.
It's kind of like putting your A-team together. I like it.
Yeah.
I want to remind everybody, while we have Margo here, if you guys have any questions, she has so much knowledge, so make sure you type in your questions for her. We're going to have a Q&A at the end of this. Margo, what inspires you and gives you hope for the future of your industry, particularly for encouraging more women to participate in this key sector? You and I were talking the other day about how ladies are going to start running lots of the money in our economy. So what inspires you about the future?
Yeah, I mean, that's just a great point. So I think it's something like by 2021, 51% of the world's wealth will be controlled by women. And some of that is the result of demographics, where women are inheriting the dollars, or their husbands are dying and they're getting the dollars that way. But that's a huge shift in where the money is. So it's critically important that we have women in these roles that that are sort of on the other side of the table from female clients. So I think companies are really starting to realize that this diversity thing is actually real, and it benefits them to have their employee base look like their client base. And even though there's tons of studies that show that companies that take diversity and put it into practice have much more successful financial results, they're actually hearing it from their clients as well. But I'll tell you a little story about something that we did in the industry recently. And I have this saying that's a little circular, but it's basically that we're not going to have more women in leadership roles until we have more women in leadership roles. And it's just that simple. And so a few of us decided in the asset management industry a couple of years ago that we just didn't know each other, and there actually are a lot of us in leadership roles. We just didn't know who each other was. So we formed this group. It was 3 of us to start, and each person is either a president or a CEO of an asset management company, a woman. And we invited about 15 women into this group. And the criteria was they had to be a leader in their organization, and they had to be fun. So there was a lot of discussion about that. But we wanted this group to get together and form what I would call a mini network. And I love this concept of creating these mini networks. And you can do it at any level of an organization. And I would really recommend that that women think about this, is to form these little networks so you have relationships with people in your industry, and not necessarily in your company, but in your industry. Mm-hmm. And so the 3 of us started this thing. We went to Montana for our first meeting, and we all got together at one of the women owned a ranch, which was handy. And we all got together and we spent 3 days together. And it was amazing to hear the stories. It took us 3 days to get around the table to hear everybody's story. But we made a pledge to each other that no matter, what time of day it was or what time zone you were in, if somebody reached out to you with something they needed help with, you'd immediately get back to them. And that has been hugely successful. And since then, a number of people have gotten on boards, a number of people have gotten big jobs. And so the real mission that we realized was that we have to be in leadership roles in order to pick up other women in leadership roles. So
exactly, Margo. When women get together and they form their A teams together, anything is possible. Anything is possible when women get together and have goals. Margo, you and I were talking also about why it is so important, especially now that we're taking over the money. Why is it so important for women to talk about money with their families, with their financial advisors? We were talking about a lot of women leave it to someone else to handle their money, but that is so important that we need to change this today for us to take control of our money.
Yeah, it's such a great topic. And there have been some good studies on this that when you talk about money in the house, and I would say this for you with your young daughter, when you talk about money in the house when kids are young, there's a real benefit, a really tangible life benefit to that. So when I was growing up, money was like any other topic. It was just like, we talked about whether we could go on vacation or like what school would cost, or it wasn't something that was hidden, and it wasn't something that was different for my brother or me. So, I mean, it just wasn't like my brother got, this is like something that I've read a lot about. Boys tend to get paid for for the tasks they do when they're kids, like go shovel the snow or mow the lawn, they get paid. Whereas girls in the household actually, you know, do the dishes and do the household work, and they don't get paid for it. So I think simple things like making allowances equal, understanding like that if you're doing something in the house, that if there's a monetary reward for the boy, it's the same for the girl, like things like that. But I'll tell you this other little thing that I've discovered recently, and there's a whole new group that's forming around this, is that poker is a really interesting way for young girls to understand strategy, risk taking, and get comfort with money. And so a friend of mine in Chicago started Poker Power, and it's taking off like wildfire in high schools and colleges, where these young girls are getting together and they're learning how to play poker. And it teaches you all these great skills. And so when my friend told me about this, what I said to her was, holy cow, I played poker as a kid. I played poker every Sunday with my family because it was like our family thing. And it's turning out that anecdotally so far, because we haven't done a study on it, but a lot of women who are managing money today played poker as a kid. And so that familiarity with and comfort around money can lead to a career, but it also, as you pointed out, it leads to gaining comfort in your life with how you save, how you invest, what your family finances are about. And it's all too often that women get to a point in their lives where they had sort of given that responsibility to their partner, and they find themselves in a situation where they now have to, deeply understand their finances. And I just think that can happen early on in young girls' lives.
Exactly. I know we have a lot of students joining us today. So ladies, listen up. Take control of your finances. Don't give it to someone else. And don't be afraid to have conversations about your money, about your family's money, about where you are. Don't leave it to someone else. Take control of your power. Do it. Okay, Margo, we're going to shift over to talking a little bit about URI. Are you ready? Ready. Okay.
I got my roadie sign right here.
The URI Board of Trustees was established by the Rhode Island State Legislature and signed into law by awesome Governor Gina Raimondo last year. You were appointed the board's first chair. Congratulations. Can you describe your role and primary responsibilities and why this new board is so important for the university's future?
Yeah, so first of all, I do give a big shout out to President Dooley, who had the vision and the fortitude to get this board formed. And it wasn't easy, but it really, really will benefit the school over the long term. And it's going to be a very important element of President Dooley's legacy, is to have gotten this, amongst many other things, to have gotten this board off the ground. But, I think that when I look so I was on campus last couple weeks ago to really see how the campus has changed. And frankly, we live pretty close to campus, and I was on my bike there last week and I was riding around, and it's incredible that how much the infrastructure of the university has changed. And it's under President Dooley's,
how much school has, it is amazing.
You were just talking earlier about the Harrington Communication School, and the Facitelli Engineering School, and it's just incredible. And something like $1 billion in bond money has come the university's way to really change the campus. And so I think the president's done a great job of really shifting the university. But I think a natural step, given the growth that we've had over the last 10 to 12 years, the natural step was to have an independent board. And while we were under the leadership of a state council, and that worked fine, this, we've really grown quite a bit in the last several years. And so I think for us to really continue that growth and for us to really achieve the things that we know we can achieve, having an independent board is really critical. And if you look at some of the university practices, public university practices around the country, those that you see growing really well have strong, diverse boards filled with dedicated people who really want to see the university continue to grow. And I think, so this was the perfect time for it to happen. And I was so honored to get the call from the governor to chair the board. I think she found out that I left Nuveen in January, and she found out that I wasn't going to be working, and she's like, well, now I have a job for you.
I've got something for you.
Exactly. So it was really, serendipitous in terms of timing for me personally. And I will tell you, it's been fascinating. I mean, to look through the lens of university during this pandemic period, and to try to really ensure that the university is in the best position we can be in through this period has been really interesting. But I also would say that between the president and the governor and a number of really supportive legislators at the state level, we have a terrific, diverse board. And that's been, that will continue to be helpful, but it's been really helpful so far.
I was blown away when I was at school for the opening of the new Harrington School Media Center. I was there for the Christian Amanpour talk. I could not believe just the innovation that's going on in school, and it wanted me to be a part of it. So I want to talk about how you kind of came back to school. We were talking the other day, I mean, I would have never thought that 20 years after graduating, I would be on the Harrington School Advisory Board. I'm now on the foundation, but it took kind of one trip back to school and thinking, I want to be involved in this. This is doing some really progressive, interesting things, but a lot of people don't know how to start. And you and I were kind of recruited back to school. So will you share your story about how kind of you came back to school?
Yeah. I mean, I love that you came back to campus and it just was like, oh, I want to be involved, because that, I mean, anybody that comes to campus today, if you haven't been to campus in the last 10 years, it'll blow your mind.
It'll blow your mind.
It's just gorgeous. So
Ellery is not the way it used to look.
I know, it didn't look like that when I was there. Even my little Tucker Hall, which was like this, dorm down by the library, looks way better now. But I think in addition to the infrastructure, what's really incredible during President Dooley's tenure is who's been attracted from a faculty standpoint and from a student standpoint. So the GPA's gone up on the student side, that we're attracting students from hundreds of countries around the world, and the faculty's really amazing, who's been recruited and retained. But to your question, I got a call from a woman named Michaela Mooney, who at the time was working with the business school. And she was like, hey, you should come see campus. And I had not even thought about doing that. And I will say, my best friends are from URI. So my best friends today are from URI, so I felt a strong affinity to the school. But she said, you should come up, and this was probably this has to be like more than 20 years ago, where she said, you should come up and see what's going on. And so I came up to campus and I made a couple of visits, and then we were sitting in her car one day on campus, and she went for the kill. She said, which every good fundraiser does, I know that now. She said, hey, you should join the URI Business Advisory Council, and you should think about a multi-year donation. And I was like, what? What does that mean? So she kind of walked me through, and sort of taught me philanthropy in a way. I really wasn't familiar with what that meant to give back to the school, why that was important, and then what would it mean to me to be involved with the school. And so joining the URI Business Advisory Council and just like you, started out on the communications side and then went to the URI Foundation and Alumni Engagement Board, which is what I did too. I just kind of got more and more engaged with what the university was doing. And frankly, as I saw the university start to change and success begets success, I was like, I want to be involved with this, because I just could see how it was, how the success of URI really means that we've got students who are, and we have so many first-time students that come to URI, the first time in their family going to college, that it just like made me so proud that we could change so many students and their families' lives if I got involved. And so same as you, like I could see the impact I was having, and it's just been really rewarding to be involved with the school.
It's been so much more rewarding. I mean, URI gave me a chance, they gave me a scholarship, and now all the work I've done for the past 20 years, now becoming, you know, I have a 3-year-old, so it's everything I'm doing now is for a legacy, and URI gave me a chance. So now I'm looking at the stars at URI and trying to help those girls that were just like me and bringing them up, and I'm forming our A-team and creating a community of women that help each other, that listen to each other and promote each other. Because I can't do a lot of the things that I do without really talented, amazing, strong women with me. And that's why I'm involved in school. And I just cannot, it's been such an honor to kind of be back on campus and now in these positions that you and I both have.
Yeah, definitely. When I was on campus a couple of weeks ago we were putting together a video for the campaign that's coming up, which is an important step for the school. It's the biggest campaign we've ever run. I was accompanied by a young man, Juan, who was a freshman going into sophomore year, and he was just amazing. And to be able to meet the young people that are going to URI and form these kind of relationships, in addition to the work that you do, like on a, the Communications Council or the URI Foundation, or the Board of Trustees, you having exposure to what young people are thinking and who they are and who goes to URI, that's a huge benefit as well.
Hey, Margo, we have one more question before then we get into the question and answer. And I want to talk to you about President Dooley is leaving, and he has done so much for school. So what are we looking for in a new president? I mean, and kind of what do you see as the future for URI?
Yeah, it's a great question. So President Dooley has announced his retirement, and out of the goodness of his heart, because he's so dedicated to URI, and I was so grateful, he's staying through the end of next year, and actually will be staying for a few months to bridge a new president in. And I think that's a really nice sort of, will be a nice continuity for the school. But he's done so much for the university. It's been an amazing, it'll be a 12-year run that he's been president of the university. So what we're trying to do is to find someone that can do what the president did when he came to school. And he really catalyzed, as we've talked about, what the university looks like. He has attracted and retained incredible faculty and students, and has very good relationships around the state. So I think some of those characteristics that he brought to the table will be sort of table stakes of things that we need in a president. We'll need somebody that really understands what URI is about and the importance of URI to the state of Rhode Island. We're the biggest producer of employees in the state of Rhode Island. Really understands how, what it means to be president of a university. And one thing I've learned a lot as the new chair of this board is this thing called shared governance, where it's not how you act in a company. In a company, it's like, you have to get people to be collaborative and to get along, but ultimately somebody makes a decision. shared governance is really important on a university campus, and ensuring that faculty share your vision. And so I think somebody that understands the faculty needs, understands what the students are about, and then importantly, has a vision of what the university needs to look like in 10, 15, 20 years from now, just like what President Dooley brought to the table, 11, 12 years ago. So
yes,
we
need
hired a
someone
search
just
firm.
to continue that momentum, right?
Exactly, right. So we hired a search firm that they're the best in the field of education. Tom Ryan, who is a fellow trustee, I've asked him, and he was very gracious to head the search committee. He knows the state. He's a huge active contributor to URI. And so we'll be starting that process very shortly, and we'll want to make it very open and transparent and bring lots of voices in to shape what people think the university needs over the next, several years.
It's going to be really exciting to see. I mean, I was just there in the new engineering building and the new marine sciences and the basketball. There are so many exciting things happening at URI. And one of the exciting things is meeting you. And thank you so much for everything that you do for school. We're just about to wrap up. Margo, I want to thank you so much for joining us. And I'm really happy that now I have a new friend. So you guys, we have about 10 minutes left, so we want to open up the platform for questions. I have a million more questions for Margo, but we're only on a limited time, so who's got some questions?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Margo and Nikki. That was amazing. We certainly are encouraging audience questions. I do have a couple here. Two great questions from Mary. So from an educational standpoint, what curriculums or majors do you recommend for women pursuing careers in investment management?
Yeah, so I was a finance major, but I will say when I went to college, my father said you could either be an engineering or a business major, and I wasn't going to be an engineering major, so I became a business major. Now, fortunately, I loved it and it worked out. But my first love actually was writing and English, and so I was a finance major and an English minor. And I would say that you want to, from a major standpoint and from a curriculum standpoint, I would say there's a bunch of really good classes in the business school. If I remember correctly, at least when I was in school, Finance 301, for example, is investments. There's a number of classes on investments specifically that actually got me really focused on what I wanted to do in my career. But I think things like macroeconomics, microeconomics, those are important sort of core courses, accounting. All those things, even though I'm not a numbers person, they help me to understand how do you look at a balance sheet, how do you analyze a company, how do I think about the economy. So I think there's a number of classes specifically in the business school, but I would say this was my experience, and I would share, complement your major with a minor of something that is totally different. Maybe it's astronomy, or it's like something that's really different that frankly gives you more perspective when you go into whatever you do for a living. And it'll, frankly, I think that the minor that I had gave me as much of an education as the major. So I think there's a bunch of courses that you want to take that are investment focused, but having a view of the world or something different than the business focus will also help you in the business world.
Awesome. That's such great advice. We do have another question as well. How do you think the pandemic and current economic crisis will impact philanthropic giving, both short-term and long-term?
Yeah, so, fortunately, people have been generous through this period. And I know Lil is on the call. She's president of the foundation. We actually are seeing really good participation in terms of people realizing that students need help through this crisis. And I'll give you an example. Someone told me recently that it takes literally $1,000 difference for a student to decide whether they want to come back to school, whether they can come back to school or not. And so we're doing sort of URI is doing sort of a mini campaign of scholarship support, so that students can, if they have some kind of financial issue in their family, maybe their parents are having difficulties, they can still continue their education. So that support is really critical, but it doesn't take a lot to actually make that difference. And what we're seeing is that the alum are really stepping up and are supporting the university. I would say generally I'm on another nonprofit board, and people are stepping up there too. So it's good to see that that you have a big segment of the population that needs help, and you have a segment of the population that can help, and it feels like that segment is stepping up to help.
Yeah, it certainly does seem that way, and thank you for your insight on that. A couple more questions that we have. Something from John. You've had obviously a very incredible and successful career. What advice might you give to your 23-year-old self? Looking back, what would you maybe do differently, or what advice would you give?
I would say that it really was important to be technically strong at something. Like, Nikki's amazing at what she does. If you think of her, you think of like how she communicates and the show that she started. And that will open up like lots of other opportunities, in your career. So you got to be technically good at something. And so for me early on, being a good, I just dove right into understanding the fixed income markets, and I didn't know anything about them before I got this job. And through education, through relationships, I really became good at it. And I think if I weren't good at the start of my career at something that I got recognized for, I wouldn't have then been tapped to be the manager, and then I wouldn't have been able to become the leader. So I think like being technically good, and I don't know that I really understood that at the time. I just like threw myself into it. But in retrospect, I realized that that was a really critical moment. I would also say that in the beginning of my career, there weren't many women managing money. And I actually got excluded from going to see clients, particularly union pension clients, because a lot of my bosses thought that a woman shouldn't walk into that room, which by the way was smoky, and there were probably like the racetrack forms were sitting on the table. Like, it was not the greatest environment. But I eventually like raised my voice and said, I should be in these meetings. These are my clients. Like, why is somebody else going to these meetings and not me? But it took me a while to get the nerve to do that. And I wonder in retrospect if maybe took me a little too long. So I would say raise your voice and ensure that that you are recognized for the work that you're doing. And a lot of times, and men do this too, this isn't just a female thing, but more women do it, which is that we don't say what we're doing. We just do the work. And I think there are points in your career where you have to raise your hand and say, hey, I'm doing this work. I should, for example, be in that meeting. And it turned out those union pension clients were my best clients. I had them for 20 years because, they were open to having a woman in the room, but it was this perception that that my bosses had. So I think you got to be technically good, and you got to raise your voice and tell people what you're good at.
That's great. And that's actually, it's a great segue into one of the questions that we received. Any advice for women to break into the boys club at the executive level?
Yeah. Well, first of all, form a girls club. You have to, you know, as Nikki's saying, you need your A team. It's really important to have your network, and your network, like as a woman, my network isn't just women, it's men and women. And there's lots of men that are really supportive of women in their careers. But there still is that club. There's still, and the club exists because people are just naturally comfortable with people that look and act like them. And that's why we have to force diversity and inclusion into how good organizations are managed. Because you just have this natural affinity to go to, you know, who you're comfortable with. Just like as a woman, I am comfortable with a female group of friends. But that club still dominates the decision making. And that's where, when I was talking earlier about this group that went to Montana, we're trying to break through into those decision making roles so that we can get more diverse employee bases. But I will tell you a few ways to do it. One is, I wouldn't say you have to go out and do this, but I realized early on that the guys play golf. And so what did I do? I went and played golf. I learned how to play golf, and I love it now. But I realized I was sitting on the trading floor in August, and everybody was out, you know, playing. I was like, where is everyone? And they're all out playing golf. So I learned how to play golf, and that actually helped me to create a lot of relationships with clients and with colleagues and people in the industry that I wouldn't normally have done. So I think finding ways that allow you to establish relationships in maybe sort of non-work ways, that can be helpful. And another thing to do is, a lot of organizations now have volunteer, groups. Go volunteer with whatever your company has. I mean, one of the ways I met a lot of people in leadership when I was young was by volunteering and showing up at events where it's a little bit more of a level playing field. It's not a hierarchy when you're doing something together. And I established relationships with people that I would never have established in the course of my job. So I think finding sort of non-traditional ways of getting to know people in your organization. The third thing I would say is, don't depend on your boss. And I will tell you this as a boss, is that you're not always thinking about everybody in your organization, but if you find these relationships around your boss, like think across your organization, not just up and down in your organization. And if you can establish these relationships outside of your boss will hear good things about you, and that makes them feel good. But you've got now these relationships sort of at higher levels in the organization that are not so dependent on your boss's view of you. And that was something that helped me a lot as I sort of grew in my career.
Margo, you're so awesome. I just
So are
learned
you.
so much just now. That was really informative. Thank you.
That really was informative. And I think actually on that note, I think we will probably make that our last question, just given the time frame. So thank you both for this wonderful, wonderful conversation. I hope that our audience learned as much as I did. Special thanks to Nikki for serving as our host today. Such a fitting.
My pleasure, Margo. It was such an honor to meet you, and now you're on my A team, Margo.
Yeah, same here. You're fantastic.
We are so lucky to have you in our community, and thank you to our audience for joining us today. Please do keep an eye out for future programs in this series. And of course, as mentioned, this has been recorded, and we will be sending out a link to our attendees as well as a survey. So please complete that survey and share your thoughts with us on today's program so that we can bring you more targeted conversations. So thank you again. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Sarah.
Bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.